Okay, hey friends. I am here with my friend Julia, who has been so gracious to be willing to come on and share a little bit about her SSP experience, which was not with me. And when we chatted originally, I don't know, maybe even like a year ago almost. Yeah, a long time
Yeah,
ago.
probably close to that.
About maybe doing the SSP, and then we were like trying to figure out time zones, and it was all too different. And so you were going to find someone locally, and then you reached back out to say like, "This is what's going on. Is this normal?" And I was like, what's happening?" And we figured out that you were listening by yourself. And so you had some pretty wild experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like?
Yeah, well, first I'll say actually I'm pretty sure everyone because I approached a few different people and then made a decision, and they all kind of did the same format where they kind of like, I think there was one person there, they didn't even do a session with you at all. Like they just give you the thing and off you go. Um,
I don't understand that. Like, I think I told you, I have come across this more and more, and I keep emailing Unite and being like, "Are you changing your recommendations?" Because I went through a whole certification program, like to become a provider, and
yeah.
they definitely said, like, do not let people listen by themselves. So I don't understand.
Yeah, well, and when I emailed them as well, they said, you're meant to be with the person until you achieve a baseline. And I didn't achieve a baseline.
No. Okay, so like let's backtrack. So you
Yeah.
met with the person. And then they said, okay, you're going to do your listening. Did they do a little bit of listening with you?
No, so I did the first session with them, and we did we did 5 minutes, and they said that I could draw or move around or that sort of thing. So I decided to draw because I'm an artist and I like to do that. And so I was just drawing and really enjoying it. So then we did another 10 minutes, I think, and I got really into the drawing. Felt fine, and that night didn't sleep at all, like completely wired. And I didn't, at that point, I didn't understand how powerful it was, and I didn't equate it to that. Like I just thought it must have been something I had a reaction to something I'd eaten. And then my mum was here got here the next day from New Zealand, and I picked her up in the city, and I had a few appointments at work and had quite a busy day, but kind of felt fine. And then I did another 15 minutes with mum that afternoon. And same thing, I was just drawing, really enjoying it. And I set 15 minutes. And I think at about the 11 or 12-minute mark, I just felt my system. It was almost like, the Energizer Bunny when the batteries run out. I just kind of went like that and I couldn't keep drawing. And so I stopped it and I was like, oh, that was weird. Um, and same thing that night, no sleep at all, completely like wired. And then the
Wow.
next day, I just had a full crash. Like I was completely catatonic. All I could do was lie on the floor and cry. And that lasted for, I think, 2 or 3 days. It was like maybe on the second day, I was like, maybe this is something to do with the SSP because it was very intense. And I was intensely suicidal. Like all I could suicidal ideation anyway. All I could talk to mum about was how much I wanted to take my own life. And she was freaking out. Like she'd seen me in some dark places, but never to that level. And most of the time it had been on the phone, and, and it had come on so quickly as well. Like, I was fine when she arrived. And um, yeah, so it was so then after I think the second day of that, I messaged the provider and was just like, hey, this is what's happening. Do you think this could be to do with the SSP? And they were like, we jumped on a call and they were like, just stop listening for now. Um, and at this point, I still didn't really believe that it was that, like it just seemed so far out that listening to 30 minutes of something could do that to your system. And yeah, so I stopped for a week or something. I think, yeah, after about 2 or 3 days I came right, and I was just so lucky that my mum was here, and she's very supportive and nurturing. And but it was interesting, as I came out of the catatonic state, I actually did come into a very strong ventral vagal state where mum and I had this very beautiful experience. Like normally, she's giving me Reiki and that sort of thing, and I ended up giving her a Reiki session, and we had this very beautiful connection. So I can cut, like obviously it's not the way to achieve that, but I could see how it was working with my system. Um, so then I think my provider said to just start with, I can't remember if it was a minute or a couple of minutes after a week, did a minute, went into a full manic state again, like not to the same level, but it was definitely like it was almost like being on amphetamines or something. And so there was a lot of kind of playing around with timing. But this was all, doing it on my own with text message communication. And I kind of got to the point where all I could tolerate was, I think I was doing like 10 to 20 seconds every 3 or 4 days. But even that, like, it was not sending me into a manic state, but I could feel my system elevating from there. And if I did it in the morning and then went to work, because I find going into work just quite stressful on its own. It's an hour drive away, and I have a lot of clients and stuff to see, and it's a very busy day. If I did that on top of the SSP, it would just shoot me through the roof again, and I would kind of go into another episode. And this kept, yeah, I was kind of going like that for a few months, I think. I only got through like 40 something minutes of it, and that was starting with almost 30 minutes in 2 days at the start. So I was doing, these tiny little chunks. And yeah, that's when I kind of reached out to you, and you were like, no. And then I spoke to the provider, and they were like, I think it was me that I said, I feel like I need to stop. And I feel like there were some other weird things that were going on, but I can't really remember now. But even after I stopped, it took me quite a few weeks for my system to come down. And then I went through a very stressful period. I sold my house, and the week of that was really intense in negotiations, and it almost fell through. And then I shot into like a full manic episode for a few weeks after that, even though I was off the SSP, but it was almost like my system had kind of tipped into that place. And I ultimately feel like now on the other side of that, I've come to a pretty good baseline, and it's almost like it's woken me up, and I'm back in a better state. But obviously it wasn't a good way to get to that place. And I'm really interested to try it again, because I can see how powerful it is. But yeah, there have been some, no massive consequences, but I definitely had some weird stuff with some of my friendships and relationships, just from like my behavior being really out of whack. And yeah, there was a bit of kind of having to resolve some things. And
I am so sorry. I feel partially like responsible because you came across it because of me. And, it's so tricky because it's like, I'm just one provider. I'm not, I didn't create it. And I don't necessarily want to tell other providers what to do. But it, the research that Unite has, the only time they had people go into a psychosis or a catatonic state was when people were listening alone. And
yeah,
like they have that right on the materials, and so also I didn't realize that you had gone into such a like having such extreme suicidal ideation. So I'm so sorry, and I'm so grateful that your mom was there. And people I think sometimes experience me as being so cautious, and it frustrates them.
Mm.
But, you know, sending somebody into a total chaos like that is actually quite dangerous. And you just happen to have support there. You were, like you said, you came through it with some relationship impact. But not everybody's at a place where they can have withstood all of that. And thank God, like you came through it okay, and you have like an amazing attitude about it. But it is a real physiological intervention. And I'm so grateful you're okay. And I'm so sorry that you went through it. And I really appreciate you sharing with everyone, because I think people, especially in the first session, I'm always like, we're going to listen to 5 minutes and then we're going to give you 24 hours and see what happens. And I think people think I'm just being ridiculous, but it just is a really big thing, and it can really disrupt your life if you don't go super cautiously, and if you don't have that person to co-regulate with as you're listening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I'm a type A personality, and I remember, listening because I heard you on Jess's podcast, and Jess is saying that she could only get through 5 minutes, and I remember when I did my first 15 minutes, I was like, oh, I'm going to breeze through this. I'm going to have this done in a month, and um, and I was like, that's, yeah, it was just funny. But the thing that I actually worked out was that when I make art, I leave my body
Mm,
and I become what I'm working on. And so it's like almost a disassociation or a
right.
flow or whatever you want to call it. But that's how I realized I didn't actually experience anything that was happening in that first 15 minutes because I was so engrossed in the drawing. And that's how I got so far in the second session before my system shut down because of that. So yeah, I didn't believe that it could be that powerful. And I think it's,
Yeah, and it makes sense. You didn't know how to know that. And that's why the provider's there to be
yeah,
watching you and make sure, that you're not like so zoned in on that drawing. That can happen for so many of us. We just leave our bodies and then we're
yeah.
like totally still. And that's also, people don't like it that I'm just like staring at them for the entire time, but I'm watching for that. I'm watching their eye movements, and I'm watching their like breath, and watching their coloring, and watching if they're either getting more fidgety or if they're zoning out, and I interrupt them and all that stuff. So I'm just glad that you're okay.
Oh, look, it's, I see all of this stuff as part of the journey at the end of the day. And I do, I feel like I'm in a better place now than before I started, but it was just obviously a rough
Yeah.
road to get there. And I'm so grateful for you intervening as well. Like that's the thing that really made me realize I needed to stop. I'd been getting messages from my body saying to stop, but it's that thing of like wanting to do it. And because I was seeing I was having such a strong effect, the practitioner was like, I know you've had, difficulties with it, but this means it's going to work for you because it's obviously having such a
Doing
strong effect
something.
on your system. And so there was the thing of like, I really wanted to finish it and get through it. But I was like, at the rate I'm going, this is going to take me years, like doing like 10 seconds every 3 days. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And what's really nice is that, I've had other people who uh, definitely one who tried with someone else and had a very similar response to you. And we were able to get through all 5 hours together. And
yeah.
she did well with it. Once we started out slowly because she brought a little bit of anxiety, rightfully
Mm,
so, to it. And so that's what we'll do with you, and we'll get you through it
yeah.
without any of the drama. Because I want people to know like the SSP is really strong, But if you do it in the really balanced way, then it should not be disruptive on your life. Like it should not even be as intense as EMDR or anything like that. It should be you can
Yeah.
do your regular life and you're feeling good and you're learning and gaining skills. And it should be solidifying, not disruptive.
One other interesting thing I did notice as well, like throughout that whole time, the only time I did a session with anyone else was my mum on the second day.
Right.
And then once when I had one of my best friends up staying, and I did I don't even know, it must have been, it was in the beginning, it was a shorter session with her. But that night I had an amazing sleep. I felt really good. And again, I didn't really attribute it, but it was the only time I'd done it where it actually put me into a ventral state
Mm,
as opposed to into a parasympathetic, into a sympathetic
yeah.
state. So
Isn't it wild? I mean, it's
yeah,
like there's actual science about the vagus nerve and how it interacts with having another human. But it kind of makes sense, right? Because you know what just popped in my head was how they did all those experiments about like hydrogen atoms or things that change when they're observed, right? So there's
yeah, yeah.
something about that relationship, that connection, that awareness of the other.
Yeah, and definitely when it's someone that you feel safe with as well.
Mm,
Like, she's one of my people, and it was profound, the difference. And that's why, because I'm living somewhere quite remote at the moment, and I'm moving back to Melbourne at the end of the year, so I'm kind of thinking that would be a better time, because then I can just ride over to her house, you know and do it when I've got more social.
I
um
think that's wise. Yeah.
yeah,
One of the questions that I ask on my intake is like, do you have a person that you can call and connect with? Because it does make a big difference. Because even though I'm with you, I'm still remote. I can't give you a hug or,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
check on you. So I think that's really wise. Well,
yeah.
beautiful. Is there anything else that you want the people to know?
No, just that it's way more powerful than you would imagine, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Don't listen alone. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna end the recording and then we can check in.